Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I am your host, Michael Mamas, coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwar Temple in the mountains of Western North Carolina. I'm here with Scott Davalos today. Adrienne is taking a little time off. She's got her hands full with her family and that, and she'll be back sometime in the future. But, family comes first, Today we're going to talk about how we got here. I mean, anybody who watches the news at all, certainly anybody who's been listening to these podcasts, knows full well. I mean, if you're on the planet, I think you know full well that, things are a mess right now, we can go through the list for the millionth time: the border, the virus, the drugs flowing in. Scotty, fentanyl, that they found, I forget what it was, 50 pounds of it hidden in a truck that got across the border just recently. And just 2 grains of fentanyl is enough to kill a person. They said there was enough fentanyl there to kill the entire population in New York City.
Yeah.
And it's just pouring in all the time, and that's one of the multiple components that I wanted to talk about. I think we do well to get an idea of all the different components that all kind of are converging into this point in time, And I think if you were really just paying attention to the big picture, and even on the news, they don't do it that much, do they? They'll talk about, oh, this is going on, or that's going on, or, the border guards on horseback, or 50 pounds of fentanyl, or whatever. But to take a step back and look at the big picture, I don't think it's that something we really see on the news that much. And I think it's really important. So that's what I'd like to do today, And Scotty, I've been talking about that in my lectures for decades. In fact, for multiple reasons, I've been predicting that at this point in time, we would have this mess that we're in. Because you could almost see, if you looked at all the pieces and took a step back, you could see they were all going to come to a head together. And that's what happened. And then, of course, I've talked about how in the 90s, there was that Jotashi, who, and it's really pretty incredible when you think about it, who said 2021 was this time of convergence. Oh, and he also said that the catalyst for the transformation into like a whole new era, a golden age, if you will, was going to start when a man with orange hair was president of the United States. It's how the heck did he know that? And of course, we've talked about 5,000 years ago in the Vedic literature, it was predicted that at this point in time, there was going to be a huge transition, and boy, I'll tell you, if you just think about it and all the stuff that's going on and the chaos, it's not going to last. I used to talk about extrapolation. And how, if something's going in a certain direction, people tend to extrapolate and say, well, if it's gone from here to here, that means in another 24 hours, it's going to be here and we'll all be dead, for example, with the temperature the difference between, 8 and 9 in the morning, say. And we tend to extrapolate with so many things. And I think now a lot of people are really in a panic because we extrapolate the mess that we find ourselves in. And we see a huge crisis around the corner. But extrapolation, usually things cycle, and that's according to all these predictions, according to what makes sense to me and has made sense to me for the past decades, is at some point, and I think we're at that point, really, the people are going to rise up. They're going to realize that this is not working. This is going from crazy to crazier, and that's it. We just can't continue in that crazy direction. And if you even look at the polls, that's what the majority of people in this country are saying now. So I think we're at a turning point. I really do. And it certainly seems to be consistent, even with numerology, if you're into that. Numerologists are talking about this as that period of transition as well, which is very interesting, I think. So how did we get here? I think we do well to, what do they say? It's good to study history, otherwise you'll repeat it. It's good. It's good to, I think, to take a step back and look at it. One thing is World War II. World War II was horrible for so many people around the world. It was a world war. It just devastated Europe. And so much hardship in this country that they talk about post-World War II. There was that period of affluence, and people wanted to do, they didn't want their children to go through the kind of thing they went through. And so they tried to create this utopian environment, nice neighborhood with the white picket fence and, the perfect life for their kids, Jell-O, all that stuff. And what it did, though, is it created a mentality in the youth, and we're talking about the baby boomers now, where it's almost like they had this idealized notion of what their life should be like as they grow up. And that sort of gave birth to, the whole hippie movement, really, and the flower children, and, everything should be beautiful. And and so it started to cease to be a very realistic perspective. And it infiltrated the universities, academia, and created this ivory tower mentality that carried over into, those kids grew up, a lot of them became politicians, and we had this kind of ridiculous worldview that, kind of like, well, it'd be great if everybody was rich. So why don't we just print more money and everybody would be rich, which is, of course, absurd. But you see that kind of mentality permeating the world. I think another component of this coming together of all these different forces into this perfect storm that we're living in now, another component was the drug culture. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, we look at the statistics and you see just how many recreational, if you will, drugs people are taking, and painkillers and OxyContin and all that. It's a drug culture. Sometimes I walk around like in a mall or a grocery store or Walmart or whatever, and I really wonder what percentage of those people, take drugs. I mean, somebody's got to be taking them, and we're probably interfacing with them on a daily basis as if we know it or not. What do you think about that, Scotty?
Yeah, I was, while you were talking, I was just thinking, it's like there's so many of these things that we're blaming it on, but it's like it still runs back to wake up, people, take responsibility for your actions and for what you do. I mean, because I had a sister that had have a sister that had she had a problem with that, but and my mom used to, what are we going to do to help her? What are we going to do to help her? And I kept telling, I was here in California, they were in New Mexico, and I was like, she's got to do it. It's not anybody else but her. Unfortunately, I've talked to her. You're not going to talk her off of that, train that she's on. She's got to figure out.
That's it, Scotty. It's a train. I talk about the momentum of the mass mentality.
Yeah.
It's a mentality that got created with, post-World War II utopian society ideal, the hippie culture, academia, drug culture.
Yeah.
And all of that just came together into creating a mentality that just created this mess.
Yeah.
And this chaos that we're in today. And then what happens is you've got like, Nikita Khrushchev in the 60s, he predicted it. He said they were going to do it. We will bury you, as he pounded his shoe in his desk at the United Nations. And they intentionally infiltrated, and that's just known. And now the Chinese are doing the same thing. And I kind of talked about that as a karmic sort of thing, because the West infiltrated China with opium back in the 1800s, like that. And tit for tat, I mean, if what goes around comes around, now that's fentanyl and everything else being infiltrated into this country. And so those factors are there. And then you've got other, like the threat of thermonuclear war. I just saw on the news this morning that China has vowed to help Iran get nuclear weapons, And so there's that whole thing that gets thrown into the mix. And then we have the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about back, post World War II. And then I talk about the medical-industrial complex. And isn't it amazing? I mean, I don't know how many of you know this, but what's it called? Ivermectin. They're calling it a horse warmer. What's that guy's name? Rogan, Scotty?
Yeah, Joe Rogan.
Yeah, Joe Rogan, and he interviewed Gupta, the medical professional.
CNN head of their medical.
Yeah, their medical guy, and he was saying, they called it a horse warmer. And I've talked to people on the street who still think ivermectin was a horse warmer.
Right.
And it was developed in Japan decades ago for people. And it's saved tons of people's lives, particularly in Africa, for antiviral, antiparasitic, like that. And so the fact that it's also used as a horse warmer, I mean, my God. Horses eat oats. That means if we eat oats, we're eating horse food. I mean, but that gets into the other thing we've got now is the whole media, and how the media spins everything based on the conditioning of their mind and how they've been really trained and indoctrinated into thinking. And then with the medical industrial complex, ivermectin costs pennies for a regime of treatment. Now they came out with this new regime of treatment, not the vaccine, but a treatment that costs thousands of dollars for one regime. And ivermectin single-handedly has freed Uttar Pradesh, a whole state in India, is now declared COVID-free by virtue of ivermectin. Why then are doctors in this country getting in big trouble if they even try to prescribe it? Medical industrial complex, of the money, by the money, for the money. Military industrial complex, of the money, by the money, for the money. And it's hard, I think, for most of us to even imagine, how could somebody allow so many people to die, be it through war or a pandemic or whatever, for the money? And so by virtue of that, I think we just tend not to believe it. I just can't believe it. Why would anybody do that? Another example that is the Great Depression. I think you all know that it was a bunch of businessmen that intentionally created the Great Depression. They even told Joe Kennedy 3 months before it happened, we're going to crash the markets, so take your money out. Then they crashed the markets. Why would they do that? Well, they did it so they could step in and buy everything up pennies on the dollar. But look what they did to humanity. It cascaded over into Europe, the Weimar Republic, and the hyperinflation that happened in Germany, and which led to so much chaos and stuff that ultimately was a major contributing factor, maybe the primary contributing factor to World War II. It's hard to believe what people are capable of doing. And it's not most people. It doesn't take a lot of people. If they're at the higher echelon and they're the ones that, can create a Great Depression or instigate a war or military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical companies, in making billions and things like that. And none of anything I've said is conspiracy theory stuff. It's historical fact. That's what happened. That's what is happening. And we just got to stop, like Scotty, you were saying, we've got to stop burying our heads in the sand about it, you know?
Yeah, the part about me and the media thing is how, I mean, Rogan, you going back to that Rogan thing, he really pinned that Gupta down, and he's like, why were they saying about the horse thing? And Gupta said that people, because people were taking the veterinary version of it because they couldn't get the other, and they took that narrative and blew that up. I
And I
mean,
have a little problem with that, by the way.
no, there's a big problem.
No. Saying it's the saying it's the veterinary version, because I'm a veterinarian, and there were, penicillin, all these different antibiotics. 99% of the drugs that we use in veterinary medicine, it's not a veterinary version of. It's the same thing exactly that's being used in for humans. They may put it in a different package.
That makes it even more terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, and they call it veterinary version. I'm not quite buying that. It's the same stuff. Dosage may be a little different, maybe not, but it's the same stuff. They make it sound like it's a completely different drug. It is not. So I'm sorry. Did you get your point across there, Scotty? Or did I?
Yeah. No, it's just, I mean, I didn't even know that, because in terms of the veterinary one, and it's the same as the other one, because
yeah, it's the same thing.
But this, CNN's got I mean, these media things, I mean, people have to wake up, and they have to start, you can't just blindly, oh, I saw that on there, and therefore that is gospel, people got to stop that,
Yeah. And all these things, that's another component, because what I want to get at here is the big picture of how the World War II thing, the Jello thing, the hippie thing, the academia thing, the drug thing, military industrial complex, also the multinationals. See, what happens then is there gets to be this ivory tower arrogant attitude, and it happened with the multinationals, where they decided they know, and we do this politically too, we know what's better for a nation on the other side of the world than they do, and we try to impose our values and our approach, and it does not work. We go in there and we screw up other societies, we mess up other cultures. They were doing much better if we just left them alone, and so there's this kind of we know better than you do mentality, and it becomes extremely dangerous then when people just suck it up like gravy. I saw it on the news and therefore it's true. And then we got this whole political media complex going, and it's just spoon feeding people. It's frightening, Climate change. That's, of course, thing that you really can't say anything about climate change without getting half the population mad at you, Personally, my attitude is everybody wants clean air, everybody wants clean water. So let's just do it. And if that means that if we didn't do it, the earth would be a cinder in 12 years, like AOC said, or not, let's just clean up the world. But see, even that now in the complex, you get the whole political thing, the anti-American thing. The U.S., needs to clean everything up, but the countries that are polluting the most, like, India and China, they don't have to do anything until 2032, and even then it's optional. And you see, this is how it goes. You'll hear people say, well, yeah, but per capita, the United States pollutes more than China or India. But I mean, I hate to sound 90% of the people, or a very high percentage of the people in India and China, they don't even have electricity. They don't even have plumbing. They don't even have automobiles. And so, of course, they don't pollute in the same measurable way that we do in affluent countries. But does that mean we want everybody to live in cardboard boxes? I think it really opens your eyes if you go to I've lived in third world countries, so not a whole bunch, a couple of years out of my life. And when you see, that kind of life, it's a little more prosperity is an important thing, and there will be some more pollution that comes with it, but then we, do what we can to pollute less, But even the ideas of that now, electric cars. Well, my understanding is that the pollution that's created in the development of an electric car pollutes the environment more than the fossil fuels will throughout the life of that car. And here's another thing. If on the news, sometimes they'll show us a nighttime scene of Los Angeles, then a nighttime scene of New York, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Chicago, St. Louis, whatever. And then, of course, Paris, New Delhi, whatever. Those places are all aglow at night with electric lights. Where do those lights come from? It's fossil fuel. Coal, mostly oil, but coal. Very little comes from anywhere else. And so they're wanting to ban that and go electric. Or where's the electric power come from? Fossil fuel. It would be great if we could have a clean, totally clean alternative energy. But if they just took the money they spent on windmills and things that don't really work that well, solar even, and invested it into R&D, I think we would have come up with a clean energy source by now, So the whole thing is just kind of crazy, I'll tell you another thing in this convergence, important factors, Scotty, is like the computer era, the internet revolution, computer internet revolution. We talk about the industrial revolution. They're going to look back at this era, no question about it, as a complete computer internet revolution. And look what's happened. I mean, people can float any idea they want out on the internet. And if you have an idea, you can get it reinforced by going on the internet and sticking with the websites that agree with what you're thinking and reinforce it. And it's pretty much with reckless abandon. It's the wild, wild west. And it's also done things with the whole financial system, not just Wall Street, but globally. Everything is just done in a nanosecond, and it's mass communication and mass manipulation. And if you really look into it, which I did some time ago, like the price of gold, it's totally manipulated. They can do whatever they want with it. And a lot of that, I think, I'm sure, has to do with this computer internet revolution. And then, I mean, you could make a great, really sci-fi, grade B sci-fi movie. And people actually theorize this, but certainly, if nothing else, it would make a great sci-fi movie. That what happened is the UFOs crashed. We found a technology in those UFOs that gave birth to this whole internet and computer thing. And it's kind of like it violated the Prime Directive. And now we've got this knowledge that we are just not mature enough or grown enough or evolved enough to have it blossom naturally in a healthy way. And it's messed up the world, So I'm totally into computers and internet and all that. I think it's great. But our relationship with it and how it's being used, I don't think anybody would argue in a lot of those ways it's contributed to a lot of troubles. So that's another factor right up there with hippies, academia, drugs, post-World War II mentality, military-industrial complex, medical-industrial complex, multinational companies, all that coming together, meeting at this point in time, creating huge chaos, as far as the Great Depression goes, people can argue that they're doing it again. I mean, who was it? George Soros? Didn't he make a lot of money crashing, national economies? And there's and again, I don't want to get too much into conspiracy theories, but there is some really documentable. Scotty, maybe you know the name of this organization. I can't think of it, but it's a global network that's working together to sort of manipulate global culture and mentality. I wish I could think of the name of that company. I can't. Yeah. Then on top of that, we have the virus, and it's we used to think, oh, Wuhan, and they created this virus, and of course, then people say, well, no, it was bats or what have you. But those kind of research facilities are all over the world. There are 2, I think, in North Carolina right now, and they're trying to develop, in the name of research, even more pathogenic viruses. I understand there's one virus that's being developed that would be 80% lethal. Far worse than COVID. So we got that going on in the mix, and all this is going on in the mix simultaneously to create huge chaos. Now, where's this going to lead? People are really afraid. What's going to happen? It's all coming to a head. Is it just going to extrapolate out into infinity? Well, I think if you really take a look, people are rising up. I think a big part of it was when they started messing with our children, and then the parents were going to the school board meetings and telling them this has got to stop. We're done with it. So there's a uprising of the people, and that's what's going to turn it around. That's what's going to change it. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that Biden in one poll had an 18% approval rating. At any rate, things are going to transform. This is coming to an end. And what's going to happen then is it's going to create like Scotty, you said a minute ago, people are going to wake up. And when they wake up, it's going to create a whole new world, a more enlightened world, a more commonsensical world, a world where a more pragmatic world, where they realize that people can't get rich by just printing more money, And so with that sobering is going to come a transformation. And I tell you, I see it as just as plain as day. Now, what's not completely plain as day is how far it's going to get, how bad this phase transition period, this transition period into a golden age, how bad is it going to get before things finally wake up? And that's up to us. There's predetermination, basically karma, cause and effect. You take a hammer and hit your hand, it's going to hurt, right? So there's principles like that, just cause and effect. And those principles are saying, if you look at, the Jyotish, the numerology, the ancient masters, and to me, at least just common sense, this is going to turn around. It's going to get great. But how bad is it going to get? Well, predictions of that go from everything from what? Armageddon, where everything just gets blown up. And I believe we came pretty close to that, some time ago. Or is it going to be something just much more smoother? It could have been something much smoother than what we are even experiencing now. There are technologies, and that's really what I'm all about is, there are technologies. The ancient seers offered them. They predicted this time. They gave technologies to make this transition smooth and comfortable and effortless, but nobody would listen. And I did my best, and I'm still wanting to do that. I mean, we can build it, Mamuni Mayan, Vishwakarman, the technologies are right there in the Vedic literature. How to do it, how to build a unified field generator, if you will, something that radiates the harmony from the source of existence that wells up through all levels of existence, through the psyche of people, feeding, common sense. What is common sense? Common sense is that level of life that's common to all the people, and we sense that and we live from that. We have common sense. And common sense, when it becomes even more refined, is just wisdom. And there's technology that can bring that about. And I've been lecturing about it, I have to say, for decades. And but it's not part of the current mentality. It's not part of the current paradigm. People can't really imagine it. And so we find ourselves where we are. And that's going to determine largely the nature of the transition that we're experiencing. Heisenberg, it comes right out of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle in physics. An electron isn't a point in space. It's a probability cloud. And how you interact with it determines where that electron manifests. Similarly, the whole dynamic is a bunch of subatomic particles, all of this, and it's moving in a predetermined direction, but it's all a probability cloud. And if we didn't intervene wisely, it would probably end up in some sort of Armageddon. But there is free will there. And that free will can cause the whole thing to precipitate out in a more positive way. And that's what we need to address. But we can't say, oh, I have free will, and therefore I do. No, you might feel free, but doesn't mean what's going on in your brain isn't all matter of cause and effect, predetermined, if you will. And so through the unified field technologies, through the Vedic technologies, what do? We access that place that is beyond cause and effect, that place of freedom, infinite freedom that dwells within us. And, I've heard these, Christians on Sunday morning TV talking about, well, what we need is God. God can save the world. It's too far gone. Otherwise, God has to intervene. On one level, it's like, what do they mean by that? If they mean some guy sitting on a cloud that's going to wave his hand and fix it all, I just can't buy it. But if they mean by that this unified field has a personified correlate, and that personified correlate is what we call God, and that persona is really what it's about, but where does that kingdom of heaven dwell? Within us. So if we access that within our own being and we all start to live from that place, or if we can create a Mount Soma or a place that radiates that coherence out, it'll enliven that value in all the people, and the world will start to live in harmony with nature. The transition will be smooth, you see? And that's what's going on. It's not one little thing. It's not, oh, this guy did this and that's bad and he should have done that. Or we pulled out of Afghanistan wrong. I mean, that is terrible, and we could have done it better. But it's the big picture. What created all of this? How did all this happen? And I think it's important to take a step back, like I think we just did, and come to grips with the reality and how we got here, because I think that will help us to more wisely move forward, and hopefully to, if all this really everything I've said really makes sense to you, then we can move forward in a way where we can access that deeper wisdom that dwells within all humanity. But it's been overshadowed by this whole dynamic, Anything else, Scotty?
No, I think we said a lot.
I think that basically conveys it. So until next time, we will sign off for now. Thanks for listening.